Check it out, everybody. I am live right now. So hit me up. BMEP, what does it mean? What's it all about? Go to youtube.com/@FKTD. Also, talk about nitrous, important head. Should I use them? When do I use them? And why? Check it out. Hit me up. Get on here right now. Get out, everybody. I am live. All right. Everybody, I am. All right, where is the group? Let me send out a mass email here. All right. Let me get everybody in here. Let me see. Pass the word around. What's up? Yeah, BMEP's an interesting topic. That's definitely going to be an interesting one. It's a measurement, and it's a kind of important measurement. Yeah, well, we can always hope for there to be no drama. We can always hope. But I almost forgot. I got to point this camera down a little bit because I got a new friend. Yeah, he's going to be with me during, you know what? I'll just put him right here. That's for the fun people. And that's all I'm going to say right there. And that's going to stay right there during every live from now on. As you can tell, I am not actually in the shop today. And that's because I finally got around to building my media PC. And I got to get used to looking down at this camera. I'm not used to it being here. I'm so used to looking straight at the screen. Let me see if I can real quickly just mount this. Will this work? Give me a little bit of a second here. There we go. All right, that solves that. I need to get my soup. I forgot. I'm hungry today, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully that microphone is clear. I've also updated my microphone. There it is. I know, terrible guy. I keep dirt alive. There we go. All right. Yeah, that's going to be my new little buddy. Man, just have not even had time to eat. I forgot this microphone. It should be a longer cord. There we go. So how does the mic quality sound to you guys? Because this was not super cheap. Not super expensive either, but definitely not a cheap microphone. So this is the first time using it. I'm not really too happy with the camera. I think the camera picture quality could have been better, but it seemed like, for the most part, the issue that I have with the cameras is everything says it's just 1080p resolution, but the quality, how it comes across, is a little odd. So I wasn't sure if it was worth to spend more money because the camera was cheap, honestly. So just give another couple of minutes for people to come in and, just give them a couple minutes to get on in here. So BMEP is just basically, I'll just start out with, that's just an abbreviation for break mean effective pressure. So just give them another. Well, I do and don't agree with you on the ultimate fuel system, Ben, only because it's a matter of, is it the ultimate fuel system you can buy to run as close to OEM? 1,000%. So it's all a kind of like a perspective. For DI, it's a fantastic setup. I'm not knocking it at all. I'm actually all for it. It was funny because you mentioned those injectors. And they remember when they first came out, they had an independent tester that tried to say they were only about 1,427 cc, which didn't make any sense because I wanted to test them, because I kind of figured, like, why would they go through all that trouble to take the injector and then modify it for a whopping 77 cc? Oh, no, it was 1330. Sorry, 90. It was like a little over 97 cc. Sorry. Which didn't seem to make any sense. And they were a lot bigger. All right, so let's kind of get started. Brake mean effective pressure. What is it? Well, the word mean in that sentence is the average. And if we look at it that way, brake, I don't know why they use the word brake, to be honest with you. I didn't delve that far into it because I didn't want to get it too complicated. Mean is average, so it's like an average effective pressure. What this means is, based upon your cylinder, your engine size, that number can change on the same output. It's a torque measurement, and it's an efficiency measurement. Your average pressure that is, so during the cylinder combustion event, defines your torque. That is, so your horsepower is not defined by anything. It's a multiplier of RPM and torque. So that's why most of your actual engine efficiency membership numbers are based off of torque efficiency. So the brake mean effective pressure is basically a measurement of how much cylinder pressure your engine creates. Now, this is important because you have a maximum cylinder pressure for a fuel. So what do you recommend? Nitrous. I'll get on to the nitrous part. I can assure you I will get on to the nitrous part. Sorry, I'm just so hungry. No, 2,000 cc injectors does not kill gas mileage. I'm on full ethanol and big ass ported head, big ported head, TO3 cams, and I still get upper 20s in the highway MPG. That's highway, not average. Average is mid 20s and lower 20s. So no, 2,000 cc's does not kill gas mileage unless you're doing something wrong. So the thing is, your typical engine, your brake mean effective pressure, which is really easy to find the calculators. Very easy to find the calculators. You just type in BMEP calculator, because you might be decent at math, but I'm not that good at math. No, not BMI. I don't want to know how fat I'm not. So, again, say hello to my little friend. Oh, no, Loki, that's not a toy for you. No, I should have never shown him. No, that's not for you. No. So, no. Bad boy. So, basically, it's also important to understand that it's your effective pressure. The BMEP is calculated off your total engine displacement, not per cylinder. So it's the size of the engine for a BMEP. This is why they do it in torque also here, because a bigger engine won't necessarily make more horsepower, but it will almost always make more torque. Almost always. Let me see. So we have displacement, 2 liters. A stock Type R makes about 290 foot-pounds of torque. And so the brake mean effective pressure on that is 358 psi, which is actually quite high like really high for a 4-cylinder turbo car. That's really high. So your typical old big block, which we want to say, or even not even a small block Chevy, right? So, and that's to the wheels generally. So, so that means the average pressure is a little bit higher. If we do 5.7 liters, right, and we come out to, let's say, 350 foot-pounds of torque NA, which is pretty normal, it's less than half that. It's 151 brake mean effective pressure. So it is massive when you start really looking into how much power you're going to try to make on these engines, especially when you want to stay on a fuel like 93. And that's kind of why I brought this up, why I wanted to bring it in, why is it important to understand? So my car, the last time I was out, I intentionally keep the torque down because your BMEP is a good indicator of how much stress you're putting an engine through. So if I go back to my brake mean effective pressure, and if I did the 10% loss through the dyno, right, and I made, I think it was around 480 foot-pounds of torque peak, and I intentionally kept that down. So if we had the 10%, which is basically, we'll just say 40 horsepower for now to make the number simple, 520 foot-pounds of torque, that puts my brake mean effective pressure at 642. That is more than 4 times of a naturally aspirated 5.7 liter V8. More than 4 times the amount of a typical naturally aspirated V8. So if you really think about that, and we got to think about it in displacement terms, if I were to take that and we yield that up into just displacement, it's massive. So if we take that number and we take my torque and multiply it, so if we do 5.7 divided by 2 times 520, that's equal to a 5.7 liter, a 350, basically a 350 engine, doing 1,482 foot-pounds of torque in order to create the same cylinder pressure. So this is super important. What's up, Juan? This is super important when it comes down to how much power can I make on my current setup. When I want to stay on 93 octane, here's the thing. 93 octane, it's done at like 400 foot-pounds of torque. Like, you're really lucky if you squeeze 400 foot-pounds of torque on the BMEP. And that's it. And you have to keep at that level because it doesn't matter whether it's 3,500 RPM or 7,000 RPM, because that cylinder pressure is the same. It's the same either way. So that's why BMEP is important, because you're just not going to get over that. And even to today's standards, though, that's a lot of torque. We'll say, even just for the record, 415 torque on a 2-liter engine, that's a brake, and this is at the crank, that's a brake mean effective pressure of 516 PSI. That is an average pressure. Average pressure across the cylinders, across the stroke, the actual combustion, the average pressure of the whole stroke time, which is top to bottom, is 516 PSI during the entire time, the average. So that means that during the actual useful combustion event, I'm pretty sure it's more than, I'm positive it's probably, well, I can't say I'm positive, I'm pretty sure it's more than 3 times that amount of pressure. You're just making a lot of heat. So if you want to make, somebody asked me, and I thought this was really good that they asked, was, I want to make 600 horsepower on a Type R on 93 octane. And when I told him, well, you're going to need a 68 millimeter turbo, a giant cylinder head, and TR3 cams if you want to do that, and you still might not get there. He was like, you're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, no, I really do know what I'm talking about, because this is what it has to do with. Because that fuel just cannot handle that average cylinder pressure. So that is what brake mean effective pressure means, and that's what it means to you when you start putting it into your build. This is also why when people come and ask me for a build, about doing a build, well, how do I get to this horsepower? What's the most efficient way? I told them, I said, well, if you really want to know, I'll do a build consultation fee, but I will apply it to whatever work you do. And then they get mad at me. Well, dang, man, well, you could throw parts at it and we could spend 3 times as much. And that's the thing. You just don't want to burn that money, right? The whole thing. So this is why I go over stuff like this. This really is useful if you really take it in and apply it to your build. So that's what brake mean effective pressure is. Anybody have any questions on that, though, before we kind of go forward onto the next subject? It wasn't a huge scenario, but anybody have any questions about that? I wouldn't assume so. All right, let's see. Now, what the heck else did I say? I said nitrous and when imported head, right? So that's another thing. That kind of goes with tonight, the ported head. When you port the head and you do it right, the power can come up, but in a small turbo, it pulls everything to the left. Well, at least because the screen's this way, in your case, that way. When you do port a cylinder head, and when do you need it? So you can do a ported head on a stock turbo. Are you going to gain anything more horsepower-wise than a stock turbo? Probably not, because the turbo just cannot move any more air. Polish make a difference? Does a simple polish make a difference? Hell no. Hell no, it does not. People will claim that they just polished it and it made a difference, but what they don't realize is they're usually, when they're polishing and on the cylinder head, there's some area on the cylinder head where there's a nasty lip that they polished out. So polishing itself doesn't do squat. It just really doesn't. And if you mirror polish it, you're going to hurt power. There's reasons for that. That's why they started doing that whole mirror polishing in the 90s. And that doesn't work. So when I think it's appropriate, what are the variables that increase and decrease BMEP? Sounds like high BMEP is just effective, good build until it goes boom. So the variable in the BMEP, there's all sorts of things. The BMEP is just a number. You mean it's more like, where do you hit peak BMEP? Is what I think maybe your question kind of applies to. Where do you hit the peak? And that has to do with your component selection. A smaller turbo will just hit, you can hit the same BMEP on a stock turbo. If you're using 93, you can hit 400 foot-pounds of torque on 93 at 4,400 RPM. Or if you put a G30 770 stock head with TR2 cams, you can now do that at, say, 6,000 RPM. So this is how you can, and I believe that's actually quite, I can't remember what RPM it was. I think it was 7,600. 7,600 divided by 52. Sorry, no. 536 divided by 7,600 times 52. That car that did this 536 horsepower on 93 was a G30 770. It had my injectors in it, TR2 cams, but it made 370 foot-pounds of torque at, I think, 76 or 7,800 RPM, somewhere around that range. So that means that brake mean effective pressure was lower than a stock turbo car at 4,500 RPM, making 400 foot-pounds of torque. So that engine, yes, it revs higher, but less brake mean effective pressure means less wear and tear. So that engine's more likely to live longer. And as a matter of fact, that same engine is still perfectly fine at 95,000 miles. The cylinder head's never been off. The head bolts have never been off. And the transmission broke. Second gear broke. It left the second gear, left the chat. So the polishing, back to the polishing. The reason I don't go crazy, polishing is mostly for visual. But there is one advantage to why I will polish a cylinder head. And that is, if you just sit there with your burr and you're porting a head and you don't polish it, all those little imperfections, they don't actually really hurt flow. It's really kind of a myth that it kind of hurts flow. Unless you got like a ported intake manifold that you have a carburetor on, that carbureted fuel's got to go down all the way down through those burr marks. And even then, it's not a big difference. Porting it is so that when you polish it, it's so you can kind of see, do I have any waves in there, right? What does the final shape of my port look like? And that's where polishing more comes into play. So the finer you polish, the more the imperfections you can see. And it can definitely help you understand, like, and get rid of any false shadows that you may have from using a burr. I personally don't polish as much as I used to. Is 452 foot-pounds of torque good at 5,800 RPM? That's entirely relevant to what dyno you're on. That's really relevant to the dyno you're on. I don't know if you're at altitude, because altitude plays a role in that number. If you're at altitude, you're not really making that torque if you're in a high altitude. If you're at sea level and you're making that kind of torque and it's on a properly calibrated dyno, that's pretty high. But being it's closer to 6,000 RPM, one thing you must understand too is that there's more combustion events to create that same amount of torque. Whereas at a lower RPM, you have less combustion events. So that less combustion events basically puts you in a scenario you have to make more individual pressure on the cylinder at that moment, right? During that single combustion event, you have to actually make it. So that's why the term BMEP is break mean, meaning average pressure, not individual cylinder pressure at that time. So, but you still won't exceed a certain amount of torque at that point. So the engine's already moving too. You have that momentum that you're not trying to fight, right? Look at it this way. If you're driving towards the, like say, you're going to run into the back of another car, but you run into the back of a moving car versus you run into the back of a car sitting still, right? Even if you run them with the same 15 mile per hour difference, you've got the car that's already rolling in your favor. It's actually going to be less damage. An object that's already still doesn't want to move. So the lower the RPM, the harder that is on an engine. So that's really kind of relevant to what dyno you're on, what altitude you're at, what was the correction factor. I mean, if it was, 105 degrees out at 4,000 feet altitude, that's not going to be 452 foot-pounds of torque. That's going to be a lot closer to 400. Is it even possible? Did you mill your head as well to increase compression? Is it even possible on a K20C on head? You can mill the head, but you're not going to really do anything significant compression-wise. Nothing worth of value. By the time you mill all that material off, you just basically made the head a throwaway. It isn't worth the trouble. Just do like I did, get custom pistons. That's your better bet, to get custom pistons. You really there's no need to mill the head. And plus, you don't really benefit that much from compression of the level that we're at. It's not like the engine is an 8-to-1 compression. We don't need all that compression. We just don't need it. So, And then Chris, if you are at sea level making that kind of torque at that kind of RPM, that's a little spicy for a stock motor. But again, it's closer to 6,000, so it's not horrible. Um, it's spicy, yeah, but it's not. Oh my! It also depends on how it's tuned. Did you get there on a little bit more boost, or did you get there on all the ignition timing at 6,000? So if you got there on a little bit more boost and a little bit more less timing, that kind of gives you a little bit of leeway. And turbo size matters too. But back to the compression thing, like it's not good to do like a 12-to-1 compression on an engine like this because you're shrinking the available area. So when you shrink the available area, you literally shrink the ability to put the maximum amount of air and fuel in the cylinder. You basically just shrink it. So if you shrink, you're shrinking your peak power capability. It's good for smaller turbos, but bad for when you want to do like me, 42 pounds of boost. Now, why did I go up in compression? I went up and I only went up from 9.8 to 10.5. And that's only worth 10 horsepower, 15 maybe. And that's on the same boost ignition. I did it for a little bit of combustion speed, okay? And I did it for drivability and responsiveness at low RPM. The increased compression helps with the combustion event in DI on a large injector. So if you try to do direct injection on like an 8.5-to-1 engine, it's probably not going to run all that great. It just won't. So that's why I did it. I didn't really do it for massive horsepower gains. That's not what I did it for. But that is a good question. It's just not worth the squeeze. You can make so much more power from porting the head properly. You can so much more power. Same amount of, you can literally, like, if I ran a stock port head, I'd be struggling. Even on the smaller exhaust housing, I would be struggling to make like 700. And I mean struggling. For a while before going to RV6, what injectors would you run that would work on both? So if they're running full bolt on, so Tampa, as far as your question, as far as injectors running, you can run any injector. It's a matter of like, what's your peak power goal? I try to steer people that direction first. So if you're fine with 500, just pick up a set of my next gens or Gen 3.5s, right? That's fine. Or even the Honda injector, those are the three I recommend. But if you want like full ethanol and future-proof capability, that can only be done on a set of 2,000 cc injectors. 550, I'm going to tell you straight out the box on a legit dyno that over here, from what the numbers I see, and we're starting from a Type R that makes, not kidding, just makes like 270. That's what they make here. That's what you put them on a dyno bone stock. That's what they make. All right. 540, 550 is the cap. But you're going to be doing that on a G25 660, not an RV6 R660. There is a difference. There is you can't compare the pumping losses created by forcing components into a stock frame. And reality is, again, remember, this goes back to what dyno you're on. So 475 here on a dyno here, okay, you're running with Hellcats. So it's kind of relevant. So, but I can't make that same power on an RV6 turbo because the pumping losses and the efficiency losses are there. It's about 20 horsepower less. So 15 to 20 horsepower less on the same injector. So a G25 660 will do 550. An RV6 R660 will do 530 on the same fuel system on that size injector. Now, if you go to a 2000cc injector, depending on what exhaust housing on the 25 660 on the head, if it's on all stock, it's all still stock motor, your numbers get a little bit closer. You're going to pick up about 10 or 15 horsepower on the R660 on the stock motor here, just because you got that RPM that you couldn't get because the injector is big enough. But as far as, so that is, it depends. Like that RPM though, I'm going to tell you right now, RPM is going to be king. So if you go with a 2000cc injector and your peak horsepower is only 10 more, but you have 600 more RPM, you might as well have 55 more horsepower because it just doesn't compare to having 10 more horsepower at the same RPM. 10 more horsepower, 700 RPM later, 10 more peak horsepower, but not having to deal with turning the boost down and still winding it up. So either way, I would go with a 2000cc injector. That's what I would do. So you port match the intake. It's composite, or, I'm not, the material, the plastic of the intake, I can't port match it perfectly. The reason I can't port match it perfectly is because the actual cylinder head is a lot bigger than the actual manifold. The manifold's literally, that inside edge of that plastic's made just big enough to hold that seal in and prevent it from leaking when you put it on the cylinder head. So I do my best to get it as close as possible. It's within, I want to say, a millimeter. I go within 2 millimeters of the edge on a race board, 2 millimeters of the edge of that plastic, and we're within about 1.5 millimeters at that point. The biggest issue is the outside radius of the port. The width of the port gets shoved in so much on a stock manifold. That's where a lot of the losses are there. And just for reference, and I proved this, tried it, tested it, did it on my car, I lost 150-ish RPM of spool by taking off my ported manifold with the methanol plate, the prototype methanol plate I had, and putting a radium plate and a stock manifold back on. I lost 150 RPM of spool. So, and I have the data to prove it. It does matter. I didn't think it mattered that much on the low end, but apparently it does on a turbo that, like mine, where you're struggling to get enough cylinder pressure to make drive pressure to spool it. Yeah. Oh yeah, K1 Kong, King Kong, K1 King Kong. His is 516 wheel horsepower. It's an MHI Stage 2, and he hangs with 650 wheel GTRs. That should say a whole lot about what the dyno's like coming over here. And I promise you guys, if somebody tells me they've got like a full stock motor, an R660 doing 570, I will have you come here. And if you can do on a full stock motor 570 on the R660 on my dyno, I will pay for your dyno time. I'm that confident. Because I see it. Just like I did it a long time ago on JSR's dyno. I did 565 on 30 PSI on the R660 on his dyno when I was tuning for him. So, yeah. 564 on 29 PSI? Nah, that's not even possible. I'm not on a stock motor. You can't. That's not even possible. It's not over here anyway. Let me just rephrase that. Not here. There's no way. You ain't even going to come close to that. 515. And if it's, I don't know what turbo it is, but 29 horsepower, man, that better be a ported head. I don't even know if cams would do that on 29. Yeah, sometimes Tampa, man, 2000 cc's, you kind of bite the bullet, man. You bite the bullet now, and you don't pay for a set of injectors later, right? You don't pay for another set. It's like the guy who buys a stock turbo, then buys a drop-in turbo and says, well, shit, it's not enough. Let me go buy a G-Series kit. And meanwhile, if he never put the downpipe and inlet on and just went straight to the G-Series kit, he would have saved himself $400 for an inlet or $450 for an inlet, $2,500 for a drop-in, and $700 on a downpipe, which is the majority of the cost of a turbo kit. So I don't say that it gap Hellcats. I said it hang 470. It hang with a Hellcat. Now 516. That gap's Hellcats. Oh yeah, he's right. We're doing it. Yeah. You're right, Tampa. Buy once, cry once. That's 1,000% right. I believe you. I'm just saying, Chris, I believe you that your number came out that way. I'm not denying that your dyno number came out that way at all. I'm not. I 100% believe you that your dyno number. I'm just saying over here it doesn't make that. So you'd have to be like 40 degrees out here to make that on 29 pounds. It would literally have to be like 40 degrees out. It'd have to be like ice cold. Let me just give you a perfect reference point. 32 PSI on a G3770, and I've done this a few times on other dynos, does 560 wheel on a stock motor. I've done it a few times on other dynos. It's 550 here, and this is dyno jets across the board. So I never done more than 550 squeezing the doors off of one. And it might even been more boost than that. So well, King Kong has an interesting story, and I should really do an interview with him to understand, because he was at a point, he was like, screw this, I'm going to sell this car. I've had enough with it. And then he met me. Throw off the balance. Doesn't that throw off Ben Brockton? All these 500 plus CTRs, doesn't that throw off the balance of the car? Well, not really, because Matthew's car, Road Atlanta, makes 550, and he's got the Road Atlanta enthusiast class world record for the time attack, for global time. So 136 something or other. I don't remember the exact time. So, off topic, what about an all-wheel drive CTR conversion? No. No, I'm not doing it, and I don't think it's worth the time. I just don't think it's worth the time. It's so much more money than the previous generations, and you're going to be eating it. Yeah, I know, but nobody did it with an OEM engine. They had to swap out the whole engine because nobody makes a transfer case that bolts up to the CTR trans. So doesn't matter if somebody did it. I don't call it an all-wheel drive swap if you're swapping the engine. Like, you're swapping the engine to a totally different engine. Totally different. It's not like he took something that already had a previous K-series. Like, you can't bolt a K20C1 trans up to a K24. It doesn't work. It's actually a J, if I remember correctly, the internal parts are from a specific Euro-spec J-series trans. It's actually from some sort of Euro-spec J36 special edition. I don't remember if it was an Acura or it was a Honda at that point. It's a Euro. Accord Euro-spec R or something. Some weird transmission. So none of it bolts up. So it's like in previous generations, they did the B series, came in a B series, and then they did all-wheel drive in a B series, and it was still like a B16. Like you can do a 99 SI, still have a B16 or a B18 in it, which is still really the same engine family. It's the same engine family. And do an all-wheel drive swap, and that's the original engine. But the thing is that when it comes down to this car, you're not going to have, like that guy didn't have, the dashboard didn't work, all the CAN bus stuff didn't work, the cruise control didn't work. To do an all-wheel drive in this car, you need a custom-made bell housing. Then, I don't know, the other thing is, there's no hubs for the back, there's no suspension for the back, there's no drive shafts. You lose the exhaust really. You really do lose the exhaust unless you put a crazy wild oval exhaust to make room for the exhaust. It's just a lot of work. I don't think it's worth the trouble. And we're not there yet on the car. The car hasn't aged well enough with the performance parts. Really has not aged well enough with the performance parts for the car, unfortunately. So, to the final topic, should you get nitrous? Now I know people are scared of methanol, but even I'm scared of nitrous, guys. Even I'm scared of the shit. Because that is literally a one wrong move. Instant peace. Like, even if you don't go boom, you can burn rings out. He says dry kit. Well, actually, I can get away with a dry kit because I have Motec, so I could do a dry kit. But when would you use nitrous? I would say getting out the hole at the track is a time to use nitrous. And there are plenty of kits out there that I know, I don't remember. I don't think it's a Nitrous Express. I think it might actually be a Holly. There's a controller, and I've installed it on other vehicles to have a set throttle position, a starting RPM, and a maximum RPM spray. So you don't need to actually have it controlled that way. You can do it on these cars. You can do it on Honda. And if you use a relay on the ECT2 input to max the signal out, you can make it so that when it sprays, you can use the flex fuel settings to make it remove timing. So yeah, you can do it. There are kits out there with controllers that you could do it. But the one thing to remember, nitrous is kind of backwards to everything else. Nitrous is a set horsepower, not a set torque. So the lower you make the nitrous spray of horsepower, the greater the torque. So 100 shot of nitrous at 5,200 RPM makes, which is the crossover point for torque and horsepower, 5,250 is 100 horsepower and 100 foot-pounds of torque. But if we take that same 100 shot and we light that sucker off at 4,000 RPM, so if we do that, we add 100 shot to that, so 4,000 RPM would be, that's now 131 foot-pounds of torque. So we just went, plus there's usually about a 3 to 5% spike when it goes and then comes back down when it sprays. So you're talking, if you sprayed at $4,000, 140 foot-pounds of torque going, yeah. So the only time I would say you would use something like that generally is, well, one, if you're trying to make ridiculous power on a stock Ford head. I'm not going to get into all the details. I'm just going to say, if you're trying to make ridiculous power on a stock Ford head and you need the air in the cylinder, it's there. Or if you're trying to get a turbo to light up. right? You've got a really big turbo in a setup, got a really big cam in it, and you want it to just light up, right? You don't want to deal with it being lazy. And then is the time to do it. There is a last extreme, but there's something important to think about when you do deal with nitrous. Nitrous and alcohol fuel, large amounts of, let me rephrase this, large amounts of nitrous and alcohol fuel don't go together. Because nitrous works off of the true octane of a fuel. So a 110 octane fuel, leaded, say 110 leaded versus ethanol, you're going to do better with a 110 leaded on nitrous than you will on a ethanol car and nitrous. Now, it might initially make more, but the amount of nitrous you can use on ethanol is not, you're very limited there. Let's just say you're very limited because the true octane of the fuel becomes exposed very quickly. So the most DI engines have a limit of E50. What would actually happen if you surpass E50? Say full out E85, but tuned for E50. So if you tune for E50 and you go full E85, the car's going to misfire full on its face, and you're probably eventually going to send a rod out the block because you're literally cutting the ignition event, and you might as well be anti-lagging when it's happening. When they go out there and I see guys that have low pressure assemblies get fucked up and they don't realize that, hey, that's not the rev limiter at 6,000 in second gear. That's you're running out of fuel, and they just keep staying in it, and they go, oh, this motor is garbage. My head gasket blew, or this motor is garbage. I sent a rod out the block. They can't hold 500 horsepower. It's the same thing as cutting the ignition in the middle of a run. That engine becomes imbalanced, and that load just is bad. It's as bad news. The engine starts to misfire. The fuel pressure drops. You see a spray during the ignition event. That's the problem with direct injection. You literally spray when you're trying to light the fuel, and since there's no valve to stop the fuel from going in, because on a port injection, the fuel just splits up all over the valve, and then the next time the valve opens, just goes and puts the extra fuel that you had in there. So that's what port injection. But with direct injection, that doesn't happen. It just keeps spitting the fuel in the cylinder at the wrong time, and because the fuel's in there, you literally have essentially, in a nutshell, it's not exactly, but you have a wet spark plug, essentially. It's like trying to light off a wet spark plug. It doesn't work. The fuel hasn't mixed, so it won't ignite. Now, there are some ways to extend the amount of duty cycle you can get away with, but I usually leave my tunes usually have a minimum of a 5% leeway because it happens sometimes, and some people just don't listen. You can tell them, like, look, man, you can't go a drop over E50. And they're like, I put E55 in it. It felt fine to me. And what they don't realize is third gear, and I call it it's like a fuel monster third gear in these cars. Because the pump is driven off the cam and third gear goes by so quickly, but yet there's enough load to draw that fuel, third gear is the hardest gear on a fuel system in these cars because it goes by so fast. There's not enough time for the fuel rail to fill. It doesn't matter if you have Motec or Honda. You can't keep up. And what they don't realize is it misfires just before red line. And that's what starts to kill these engines. So these guys going for that last 10 horsepower, well, if you got a guy that's constantly bam, 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 it's not going to live. It's just a matter of time. And there's so much hush-hush about it. And I've seen so many of them, kaboom, kaboom, kaboom. Trust me, guys, I see a lot of them blow up from a lot of other guys. I just don't post it. Can you run meth and E85 at the same time safely? Yes, absolutely. 1,000%. All day long. I was running methanol and E85 for a long time. But you mentioned the cleaning effect. I will tell you the only way it has a really good cleaning effect is to have a little bit of water in there. Not a lot. But running straight methanol is not a good cleaning agent. So I don't know if you guys ever seen it. They got that weird cleaning thing for the microwave. They call it the Angry Mama. So a little thing that you fill with water, and it like you put it in there for so long, and it literally boils the water and puts steam out, right? And it loosens all the trash inside the actual microwave, right? Well, the same thing with your combustion chamber. If you have a little bit of water in there, as it goes in, that little bit of water just gets under the trash and gets rid of it. So when you have a blown head gasket, right? You go look down there, you got carbon, carbon, clean, carbon. Well, clean, you know what cylinder's blown. You're like, shit, that cylinder's got a blown head gasket. Those the pistons are too clean. That piston's too clean. So, but pure methanol is not going to have that effect. It will help wash away oil residue a little bit, but since the fuel doesn't really stick to the walls of the ports, it doesn't wash away as much as you think. And if you're doing it the right way with methanol and the right RPM, not as much hits that valve as you think. So water, for whatever reason, it just has a different effect going through. It doesn't behave like fuel. So if you run full out E85 and methanol injection, you're essentially just like running more methanol. I will say this: you can run enough methanol to hypercool a cylinder and lose power on a car. You can, but there's a trick to that. Pull fuel out. You're running too rich. You're just running way too fat at that point because you literally cool it down so much. Or you can throw a shitload more boost at it and just make the cylinder hotter. But in a low boost scenario, you can run methanol on top of E85, lower boost, lower horsepower, and actually lose power. You can. But, man, you'd have to really... Well, that's also why on ethanol in these cars, on a stock motor, if you run a fairly rich air-fuel ratio, you lose power. Do I store my car for winter? No, I don't. Nope, my car gets driven year-round. I just don't drive it as much in the winter. I actually don't have a garage anymore. So, no garage equals no storage. Like, I don't have, like, a garage for my car. So, no more storage. So, fuel cleaners aren't really going to do much. Maybe some residues in the lines, but... and maybe a little bit of residue on the pistons. They're kind of like... I don't know if you've ever seen it. They use usually more of a... I'm trying to think of the right words. So you know how like a non... like it's a petroleum, but it's a non-flammable petroleum. So like if you've ever seen a cylinder where they break a ring and they get a lot of oil in the cylinder, you can actually clean the cylinder, the piston with the oil. All right? Because the oil won't burn. So in fuel injector cleaners, they kind of work a somewhat similar way where it's a non-burnable like petroleum, and it kind of gets underneath the carbon and soaks in, and then the stuff gets blown off with the combustion events. Loki, what do you want? Come on. Leave my troll alone. Leave him alone. No, no. Leave it alone. Come here, you. All right. Come on. Come on. Go. No, it's not playtime. It's always playtime with you. Always. Always. Oh. So, and for those of you who have ever thought about running certain fuels, an odd fuel that does pretty well, but it is very corrosive on these engines is Q16, but it does better on a stock engine than it does on most ported heads, because Q16 likes a lot of ignition timing. So, and I mean a lot. Q16 likes a lot of ignition timing, but it will destroy. It is really bad at destroying fuel pumps and other things in there. It's just a very corrosive fuel. But it's like you're going to run it for a weekend and then you make sure you get that out of there. If you had a choice, one choice for cooling mod, which mod would you choose? Radiator. You get the biggest radiator you could fit in the car. That's what I would do. So, and a lot of people don't understand why I say, because there's that debate too. That's a good one. I should probably do a whole live on that too. But in a nutshell, it's kind of not long enough to do a live, so I'll just kind of spit it out. Cooling mods, radiators. They go, I've got 5 times the fin density. Great. You get 5 times less air through the radiator. See the problem there? There's a maximum usable fin density. People go, well, if you just go a bigger capacity, that doesn't solve your problem. Well, if you do a bigger capacity in a reservoir, maybe. But if you do a bigger capacity in the radiator, if you double the capacity of your radiator, what you're doing is your coolant will stay in the radiator twice as long. So that means it has twice as long to travel through the radiator and cool off. So that's why I'm going to say, put the biggest damn radiator you could fit in there. And that will give you your best result. The next on the list would be in cooling would be front grille. Get the most amount of air in there. And then next would be hood. Anything else after that is so minimal. So everything else after that, it's just so minimal. It's like you're pinching pennies at that point. You know, talking about, oh, well, the intercooler's too big or this or that. A lot of that stuff doesn't play as much of a role as you'd think. See, heat rises. So, and because heat rises, if heat stayed at the bottom, we're pretty sure there'd be a good chance the intercoolers would be higher up in the engine bay. Like they'd be up on the top part, not on the bottom. So, generally the hottest part of the radiator you're going to want exposed to the open air. That's also why I'm totally against reverse flow hoses. They don't do anything. So that's another. I'll tell you what happened with the reverse flow hoses. If you take a stock car, put reverse flow hoses on it, like, wow, I got 5 to 7 degrees less temperature. Wow. But then you go do it on a car that has a flex fuel kit on it. Like, it didn't change shit. What happened? I don't get it. Ethanol doesn't actually cool. Just put a flex fuel kit on it. And you'd be like, what the hell happened? Well, here's what happened. Your coolant temperature for your fans is no longer run off that sensor on the bottom. So by running reverse flow hoses, you put the hot coolant down to the sensor that used to be triggered for the radiator fans. These engines These engine stock run off the temperature sensor from the radiator to turn the fans on, not from the coolant temperature on the cylinder head. So basically what they did was they put the coolant down to the bottom by the sensor that triggered the fans and turned them on to high speed while you were driving, which is all they did. So that's why they don't work. That's why that's a myth. What happened? What happened? Are you okay? I run 2 gallons of 110 and 3 gallons of E85. What? That's a crazy mix, dude. What's your ethanol content? Forget all the craziness. You say 2 gallons of 110, 3 gallons of 85, and 7 gallons of 92. I'm going to tell you this, though. I should say something about that. If you're on E30 and you put higher octane mixed to E30, unless you have a really high octane fuel, you're probably not going to see more ignition timing. Hang on. What are you doing? What's the matter? Oh. Right, Spaz. It's the effective octane. Like on E50, you can put all the race fuel you want in there on E50, and you're not going to gain anything. You're not, unfortunately. Turbo cars and ethanol and the cooling effect is just so much greater. So it depends on your ethanol mix. So if you have like 25% ethanol, then that's different. So what's the maximum PSI the stock ECU can handle? Now that's an interesting question. Here's what I haven't had a chance to do. I haven't had a car that can make more than 36 PSI on the new wastegate controls. Stable-wise, to keep the throttle plates from closing, I generally see between 32 and 34 PSI stable. That's a key word, stable. One-hit wonder pulls, yeah, we can all do those to 36 PSI, but that is a different story. So with the wastegate charts, I haven't had a car, like even if you got a G30 770 kit, you need ported head to really drive that turbo high in the boost range. And then the engine starts eating the boost. So you would need like a G30 900, ported head, maybe a small stage 1 or a stage 1 caliper or a tier 2 cam, and you'd have to have a 2.5-inch hot side pipe on a good intercooler to even find out. Topic. The main bearing clearances on the center bearing supposed to be bigger or less than the rest. The main bearing clearances are supposed to be bigger. So 36 PSI. Yeah, well, you're missing one thing, Chris. Maybe. But we're not getting into all the details of that setup. You're forgetting about one thing. Notice I said 2.5-inch charge pipe on the hot side. Two and a half. The reason being is, even though the outlet of a G30 770 or a G30 900 is, yeah, you can join, man. You can join the club. I ain't worried about that, man. Just join. Just as long as you're not getting a little crazy drama. What was I talking about? The 2.5-inch charge pipe, even though you turn around and the outlet of the turbo is 2 inches, you get a restriction in the pipe over time. So it's like anything else. You could have a 3-inch pipe this long or a 3-inch pipe 30 feet long. But that 3-inch pipe that's this long will flow more air because you don't have the restriction against the edge of the pipe for that length of time. So that's why 2.5, later, brother, take it easy, Ron. That's why a 2.5-inch, thank you, man, but I'll be fine, man. I think that thing's going to be more inland. It's not really going to hit me over here with the hurricane this time. The 2.5-inch pipe helps prevent boost pressure from being backed up inside the compressor cover. Because when you have too small of a charge pipe, your boost pressure gets backed up inside the compressor cover. And then you're not actually like, yeah, you'll make close, but you've been making 4 or 5 pounds boost less than what you could be, peak capability wise. So that's the hard part. There's very few cars that are capable of overrunning the limit. And even so, just for reference standpoint, 34 PSI on my 3900 does 722 on my dyno over here on the ported head and cams. So you could literally replicate that same run on Honda. And that was with the 101 exhaust housing. So you could literally replicate that. So it's very hard to replicate more boost than that. Very difficult to go higher than that. There's not really much there. Now, with a smaller cam like a tier 2 or a stage 1, yeah, you could get there, but not too much. Not too much. And boy, this is so weird seeing this curved screen. Anybody else here got a curved screen? It's my first curved screen for a laptop. Like, what's funny is I was trying to buy a different screen. I did not want an ultra wide screen. I wanted a standard 16:9, but like they wouldn't, like I couldn't get the screen I wanted because they turned around and they made it a stupid kit where it had this extra adapter piece and it was now only be sold this way with an extra $700 like mounting adapter kit. So, but I wanted something, by the way, for those, this, I didn't really buy this PC for like gaming. I didn't buy the PC, I built it. It's the first PC I've built in a very long time. I built it for content creation. So I'm really trying to get myself in the time to go down during the route for better content creation. So I finally have been able to remove all the videos off of my iPhone, which I had hundreds of them on there. And I can literally now take and record stuff in the actual level of quality I want and not take 6 years to transfer it over Wi-Fi or to turn around and when I edit it, have it take longer to export it than it does for the length of the whole video. So that was absolutely killing me time-wise to try to make a content video, take a 10-minute long video that takes 30 minutes, 40 minutes editing. And I go, oh, look, it's going to take another 30 minutes to export it or 40 minutes to export it. I was like, well, damn, I don't have time for this. So hopefully I can get better over the next couple months for content and I can start putting out some decent videos. And I just got to figure out what everybody really wants to see, The lives are great and they help a lot, but not a lot of people just want to look at a talking head. I know for you guys that are patient, I appreciate it. I do. Whatever happened to that 5,000? Okay, 5,000 gallon pump you showed me. So how do you join the 500 club? It should be just under Facebook. I didn't see that. Sorry, Dolph. That's just under my Facebook. It's under FK8 Tuning Development. It's just, you could just go FK 500 Plus Club. It's in Facebook. What the heck was I say? So that pump's there. The Aeromotive 5 GPM pump. It's 5 gallons per minute. AE Aeromotive 5 GPM pump. And by the way, guys, after this last run at the dyno, I'm done. I am legit done. Like, no, I'm not going to do 1,000. I'm not going for it. Oh, I should mention one last thing I forgot to mention. The one last time to use nitrous. You want that last 4 or 5 pounds of boost that you can't make because you don't have enough engine to make that 4 or 5 pounds of boost within your RPM range. Rephrase that, within your RPM or camshaft size range. That is when you want that last bit of nitrous to do that. Seeing track footage. See the numbers guys are running? Ben, my car is a roll race car, and it's meant to roll against other cars. That's a really difficult thing. It's not a drag race car. Tampa, that was a good idea. I'm actually talking to you. One of my customers that's in the here now is I'm going to try to do like a capture carded like interview, just a YouTube to YouTube interview on his car and his experience and what's on the car now and maybe some of the things that he's going to do with the car. And just going forward, the steps that through and through, which I think is really neat to see. We can go over some of the growing pains that happens when we build cars, because as so many people see these cars and then they don't realize, because nobody's ever willing to say, hey man, I went through this amount of shit to get from here to here. Nobody's willing to say it. They're not willing to say it because they turn around and one third of the community goes, oh, you're stupid. And I can't stand that, because no person should be put down like that, because then the first thing that comes to mind to them is, I want to sell the car, because they're already fucked up in the head because they're having a hard time with the car. And then 1/3 of the community wants to mock them. So that needs to go out the window. We need to realize that everybody has growing pains when it comes down to builds. I've had mine. And many other customers have had it too. We all have those growing pains with cars, But all the big crazy builds and all the records or whatever, they either get set one of two ways. Somebody built the path 98% of the way for somebody else, and they got a record. But those guys that are the one-hit wonders often disappear, right? And then you got the guys who are constantly been there since the start. Maybe they don't always break a record, but man, they're always at the top, somewhere near the top of the chart. The problem is we forget about those guys. It's like yesterday's news, right? I made 850 wheel horsepower. That's like people are like, no big deal. I've already seen 920. Oh, bro, that's an engine dyno. Congrats, Or so-and-so made 913. That's the first thing out of their mouth. It's not like, hey, man, nice numbers. Holy shit, that's awesome. No one really understands how hard it is to make 850. It's easy to make 500 on these cars. That is like, okay, yeah, so what? Because there's thousands of them out there, right? There are, as far as I know, without nitrous, which I can't even say one of these. I can't even say the other two of the two other cars that I know of are over 800 are even without nitrous. I can't even say that they are. There's only 3 FK8s on the planet making over 800 wheel horsepower. Think about that. 3 on the planet that I know of. I have one. So, and I'm grateful to. But anyways, that's pretty much it. That's all I really gotta say. We should really try to be a lot better about as a whole with the community. When somebody's down, man, pick them up, man, because these are great cars. So, and my build's almost done, and I think I need a different project, because I'm not going to put a sequential in the car. I've decided against that. I'm not going to put a bigger turbo. I'm not spending $3,500 on some wild turbo to hit a 4-digit number. I'm just not doing all that. So it's not worth it. That craziness is not worth it. I don't see the value in that. Not anymore. For what? I go buy another turbo to get what? Another 50 horsepower, another 70 horsepower. So all I can say is though, I have something. I have something up my sleeve, and I will be back on the dyno for the last, more than likely the last time that I'm going to put up a really big number, and then I'm going to just focus on. I'm probably just going to take that big ass turbo off the car. Let me go get it because I still have it. This wonderful 6466 and put the bigger exhaust housing on it and just drive the car. Just put the slightly bigger exhaust housing on it so that I have a little bit better top end and just have fun with it. Because that turbo was a lot of fun. The one I have in the car, it's fun too, but I can't stay in it without getting into it, like pretty much getting arrested. Yeah, I think you're right, Ben. Build it for me. I'm tired of the R&D. I'm tired of, what can be done. I did 797, and this little, I want to kill him. He chewed the darn thing. He chewed up my dyno sheet. He chewed up my dyno 797 sheet. Yeah, I'm talking about you. You. Yeah. My 797 was like 68% ethanol, DI only, at a 12.0 command coming out the tailpipe, 11.7, fat as can be, on the overdone rich side. So I made 800 wheel horsepower on basically 70% ethanol with just DI. I don't know anyone else that's done it without doing a 3000 cc injector. So that's all I'm going to say. But, but those records, that goes unnoticed. That's very unfortunate because, to be honest, guys, that's something really special to see that kind of ethanol content and not have to have port injection. I did not have the methanol. I only have about 60 or 70 horsepower worth of methanol in my car when I was running it. I didn't have a lot of methanol. And since I didn't use it for ignition timing, it was only worth extra amount of fuel. So it's not like I had 400 wheel horsepower worth of methanol in there. So, but yeah, that's it, man. I'm going to just build them for me. And when I come across the FL5 guys and stuff, and if anybody's in here with an FL5 DE5 and you put a bigger turbo on it, like a G25 660 or an RV6 or even a P700, and you start seeing some weird wastegate behavior issues, and you're getting this nice choppy graph coming out the other end, I expect to see a lot of those cars, but I already solved that problem. Vet build next. Yeah, what really killed me? This is what killed me. I walked into the shop that I work at, C6, Z06, with all the just the little body trimmings, nothing crazy. Anybody asked me to tune a Kuru Plus yet? If RJ, are we talking about the FL5? Because I tuned the Kuru a long time ago. I said a Kuru Plus. Uh-oh. What did they make now? So this is what? A bigger Kuru? Because you have Kuru Plus. I already did DE5s and FL5s. Yeah. They work great on it. The wastegate tuning is great on stock turbo, but as soon as you put a big turbo on it, it goes apeshit nuts. It goes nuts. As soon as you start putting any sort of amount of like 26, 27 pounds of boost on it, like MHI or anything else, it's more the Garrett's and the bigger ones. It starts getting angry as hell. Now, you'll see a nice clean boost pressure number, but when you see on the actual throttle inside the data log, the throttle plate's constantly opening, closing, opening, closing, opening, closing. Because the turbo sizes are so different in behavior in the high RPM, they really do not have the same type of control settings. There were areas of the wastegate expected open chart that I had more than 5 times the expected original position to get a perfectly smooth pull where it hit target boost across the board, and at no point did the ECU try to stop the slight boost overshoot with throttle plate closure. Too many people leave that. And I'm going to tell you guys right now, that's where you start running into weird fueling behaviors and other oddities that happen during a run. It happens. There are certain turbos that it does it with, and as soon as you open up the system and you get a catless downpipe and a full exhaust, the more difficult it gets to deal with that wastegate because you don't have the back pressure creating more of a closed wastegate position, because it only expects a certain amount of open, and then it only goes so far, and then it sees, oh, damn, I'm over 2 pounds of boost, and I don't want this wastegate, so it just takes the throttle plate and starts closing it. So you're going to see a lot of that, and you're going to see a lot of tuners send it right out the door, and that's going to piss me off. And that's also why there are certain cars that what they'll just do, as long as they have enough fuel system, they will just crank that bitch until that wastegate is already shut and it no longer gets angry, which is not the answer. Because you shouldn't be having throttle plate closures on 25 pounds, and the answer should not be, oh shit, let me just put 33 pounds in it, that'll solve it. That's not how you tune a car. And I see that shit all the time. And it's like, wow. I went through and I developed a wastegate chart for the G25 660 for both the FL5 and the DE5. So I have the wastegate chart for it for the FL5 and the DE5. And you have to build those charts to get a perfectly clean dyno pull. That graph I posted the other day has a super smooth dyno jet run at a medium horsepower range. The baseline in the car was 273. The P700 did 380, and that's all it would do. And the G25 660, this is all the same dyno. And the temp, yes, it was different days. All the temperatures were within close amounts. And the final run was 435. And it had a perfect, it was clean up until 6,000. And then at 6,000, and it has some waves in the graph. And I was like, I'm not sending that out the door like that. Everybody else will send it out the door like that. I refuse to do it. I will sit there and I will find a way. Anyway, that's just what I expect to see. That expect to see some of that. Now you won't feel it. You're not going to feel it in the car because it's like an 8 horsepower differential, 8 to 10 horsepower differential, but you will see it on the dyno graph. Anyway, ladies and germs, this is a long live, and I've been yapping my ear off in the wrong direction. And even he's tired. I'm tired. I got to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I got to work this weekend because I got to get caught up on orders. But thank you, everybody, again for joining me. I appreciate everybody as always. Hopefully I can get to Grassroots Motorsports this year with Matthew. Unfortunately, there's some things that have been holding back about maybe me being there. His car will be as ready as it can be with the parts available, 100%. But I'm not sure if I can make it to the Grassroots Motorsports event. I'm going to try. And if I go, thank God, now that I transferred all my stuff over, I can get some nice, high-quality footage if I go. If not, I can get some footage from some of the guys there and maybe piece some stuff together. So thank you again. And like I said, I'm going to do forward. Maybe next week, hopefully, we can get another good live. And I'll see y'all next week.